Racist chef kicks out Snoop Dogg, but what happened next shocked everyone. The elegant clink of glasses and soft murmur of conversation filled the air of La Maison Étoilée, a high-end French restaurant perched in the heart of Los Angeles. Known for its exclusivity and strict dress code, the establishment catered to a clientele that prided themselves on appearances and prestige. At the helm was Chef Bernard, a portly man with a perfectly pressed chef's jacket and a stern, almost severe expression etched onto his face. For years, Bernard had run his restaurant like a fortress, fiercely guarding its reputation and ensuring that only the right kind of people walked through its doors. On this particular evening, the restaurant buzzed with its usual crowd of socialites, business moguls, and celebrities looking to enjoy a five-star experience. Bernard stood near the open kitchen, surveying the dining room like a hawk, his eyes flickering between plates and patrons. To him, everything had to be flawless, a reflection of his meticulous standards. But then, the door opened, and in walked someone Bernard didn't expect. Dressed in a laid-back outfit, a crisp blue button-up shirt, loose jeans, and a pair of pristine sneakers, Snoop Dogg strolled in with the unmistakable air of confidence that only he could carry. His braided hair hung neatly down his back, and a gold chain glinted softly against his chest. He paused for a moment, glancing around the room with a casual nod of approval, as if surveying a familiar neighborhood. The other diners noticed him almost immediately, a ripple of whispers spreading across the room like wildfire. "Is that Snoop Dogg?" a woman at one table murmured to her companion, who craned his neck to get a better look. "What's he doing here?" As the whispers grew louder, Bernard's sharp eyes zeroed in on the source of the commotion. His brow furrowed deeply as he watched Snoop approach the hostess stand, his laid-back demeanor at odds with the restaurant's high-strung atmosphere. Bernard didn't recognize Snoop, not immediately, anyway. All he saw was a man whose casual attire and swagger didn't align with the image of refinement Bernard had so carefully cultivated for his restaurant. Before the hostess could say a word, Bernard strode across the dining room, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor with purpose. The chatter in the room quieted as patrons turned to watch, sensing the tension brewing in the air. "Excuse me," Bernard said, his voice clipped and authoritative as he addressed Snoop directly. "Can I help you?" Snoop raised an eyebrow, a small, amused smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, I got a reservation," he said smoothly, his voice low and melodic. "Table for two." Bernard folded his arms, his eyes scanning Snoop from head to toe. "A reservation?" he repeated, his tone skeptical. "Here? Are you sure you're in the right place?" Snoop's smile didn't falter, but a flicker of something sharper crossed his eyes. "Yeah, I'm sure," he said, his tone remaining calm. "Name's Calvin Broadus?" The hostess quickly flipped through the reservation book, her cheeks flushing as she found the name. "He's right, Chef Bernard," she said quietly. "Reservation for two at 7:30? Bernard's jaw tightened. He glanced back at Snoop, his eyes narrowing. "I see," he said slowly, his voice laced with disdain. "However, I'm afraid we have a strict dress code here. Sneakers and casual attire are not permitted." Snoop glanced down at his shoes, then back up at Bernard, his expression unreadable. "Didn't see that on the reservation confirmation," he said casually. "But hey, if it's a problem, I'll take my business somewhere else." Before Snoop could turn to leave, Bernard raised a hand, his lips curling into a smug smile. "No need for that," he said. "Since you're already here, let me make this easy for you. La Maison Étoilée caters to a particular clientele. I'm afraid you simply don't fit the image we uphold." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Diners exchanged uneasy glances, some visibly shocked by Bernard's words, while others averted their eyes. Snoop's smile faded, his expression growing serious as he held Bernard's gaze. "Is that right?" Snoop said quietly, his voice calm but carrying an edge. "And what kind of image is that exactly?" Bernard's smugness faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "We strive for elegance," he said, his voice firm. "A level of sophistication that, well, I'm sure you understand." Snoop's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't raise his voice. Instead, he nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "Got it," he said, stepping back. Appreciate the clarification. He turned and walked toward the door, the weight of Bernard's words hanging heavily in the air. As he left, a quiet murmur spread through the dining room. Some patrons looked uncomfortable, while others avoided eye contact altogether. A young waitress named Anna, who had been standing near the kitchen, clenched her fists at her sides, her cheeks flushing with anger. "That was unnecessary," she muttered under her breath. Bernard turned sharply toward her, his eyes narrowing. "What was that, Anna?" he said, his tone icy. Anna hesitated, but the anger bubbling inside her gave her the courage to speak. "You didn't have to treat him like that," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "He had a reservation. He didn't do anything wrong." Bernard's face darkened. "I don't pay you to question my decisions," he snapped. "If you have a problem with the way I run my restaurant, you're welcome to find employment elsewhere." Anna bit her lip, her heart pounding. She wanted to say more, to call out the blatant prejudice she had just witnessed, but the fear of losing her job held her back. Instead, she turned and walked quickly toward the back of the restaurant, her frustration evident in her hurried steps. Meanwhile, outside the restaurant, Snoop stood on the sidewalk, his hands in his pockets as he looked up at the building. A small crowd of onlookers had gathered, some snapping photos or recording videos on their phones. Snoop's calm demeanor remained intact, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes, a quiet determination. One of the onlookers approached him hesitantly. "Are you okay, man?" he asked. "That was messed up, what just happened in there." Snoop turned to him, offering a faint smile. "I'm good," he said. "Don't worry about me." The onlooker hesitated. "Well, I got it on video," he said, holding up his phone. "If you want it, I can send it to you. People need to see this." Snoop paused, considering the offer. After a moment, he nodded. "Send it," he said simply. "Appreciate you, bro." The man grinned and quickly shared the video. As Snoop watched it play back on the screen, his mind began to race. He could feel the weight of the moment, the injustice of what had happened, and the responsibility that came with being in a position to do something about it. "This ain't over," Snoop muttered under his breath, his gaze sharpening. "Not even close." The night deepened, but the tension around La Maison Étoilée only grew. The video of the incident, now circulating on social media, had started to gain traction at an alarming speed. In the video, Bernard's dismissive and condescending treatment of Snoop was clear, as was Snoop's dignified response. People were quick to react, expressing their outrage online. Tweets, comments, and posts began to pile up. "Did y'all see how Chef Bernard treated Snoop? Straight up disrespectful. Cancel this place. How are you running a high-end restaurant but can't recognize Snoop Dogg? The audacity of racism is wild." Snoop handled that with class, but Bernard's arrogance? Unforgivable. Within hours, the hashtag boycott La Maison Étoile was trending, and public figures and celebrities started weighing in. Some shared their own experiences with discrimination, while others openly condemned Bernard's actions. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, Bernard remained oblivious to the storm brewing online. He carried on with his usual routines, barking orders at his staff and ensuring that every plate leaving the kitchen was impeccable. To him, the incident was a minor hiccup, something to be swept under the rug and forgotten. But the staff weren't as indifferent. In the break room, Anna sat with a few other servers, scrolling through her phone as the video of the altercation played on repeat. Each time she watched it, her frustration grew. "Look at this," she said, holding up her phone to the group. "The whole world is seeing what kind of person Bernard really is." One of the other servers, a young man named Liam, frowned as he leaned closer. "This is blowing up fast," he said. "People are furious. They're calling for the restaurant to shut down." "Good," Anna said firmly. "He deserves it after what he did. I just wish I'd spoken up more in the moment." "You did more than most would've," Liam replied. "But Bernard's not going to change. He's too set in his ways." Anna sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Maybe," she said, "but this isn't just about him anymore. This is about everyone who's ever been treated like they don't belong because of how they look or who they are." Back at his hotel, Snoop sat with his team, reviewing the flood of messages and media coverage surrounding the incident. His longtime manager, Ted leaned over his shoulder, shaking his head in disbelief. "This thing's gone viral," Ted said. "You've got people from all over the world calling out Bernard. The restaurant's already losing reservations. What do you want to do about it?" Snoop leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but thoughtful. "This ain't about revenge," he said. "This is bigger than that. I want people to see what happens when you take the high road." Ted raised an eyebrow. "So what's the move?" Snoop paused for a moment, his gaze distant. "We're going back," he said finally. Ted blinked, clearly taken aback. "Back? To the restaurant? After what happened?" "Yeah," Snoop said, his voice steady. "But this time, we're not just walking in. We're bringing the whole community with us." The plan began to take shape over the next few days. Snoop reached out to local leaders, activists, and influencers, inviting them to join him for a second visit to La Maison Étoilée. His message was clear. This wasn't about tearing down Bernard or his restaurant. It was about creating a conversation about respect, inclusivity, and the power of change. As word of the plan spread, anticipation grew. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a powerful response to discrimination. Fans and supporters flooded social media with messages of encouragement, eager to see how Snoop would turn the situation into something positive. Meanwhile, Bernard was starting to feel the pressure. The restaurant's phone rang constantly, not with reservations, but with complaints and cancellations. The once-packed dining room now had glaringly empty tables, and the remaining patrons seemed uneasy, their conversations tinged with whispers about the viral video. Chef Bernard, one of the hostesses, said nervously as she approached him in the kitchen. "We just got another cancellation. That's the third one today." Bernard's face darkened, his temper flaring. "What is wrong with people?" he snapped. One little misunderstanding, and suddenly everyone wants to play the hero online. The hostess hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "It's not just a misunderstanding, chef," she said cautiously. "People are upset because they think the way you treated Mr. Broaddus was unfair." "Unfair?" Bernard barked. "Do you think I care about the opinions of people who don't understand how this industry works? My restaurant has standards, and if people can't meet them, that's not my problem." Anna, who had been silently polishing glasses nearby, couldn't hold back any longer. She turned to Bernard, her eyes blazing with anger. "It is your problem," she said sharply, "because those people are the ones keeping this place open. And the way you treated him? That wasn't about standards. That was about your ego." The room fell silent, the staff exchanging nervous glances. Bernard stared at Anna, his expression hard and unyielding. "If you don't like the way I run things, Anna," he said coldly, "you're welcome to leave." Anna stood her ground, her voice unwavering. "Maybe I will," she said. "But before I do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth about what happened here." With that, she set down the glass she had been holding and walked out of the kitchen, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what her next step would be, but she knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. The day of Snoop's return arrived, and the atmosphere outside La Maison Étoilée was electric. A crowd had gathered, holding signs and chanting messages of unity and equality. News vans lined the street, cameras capturing the scene as reporters speculated about what would happen next. Inside the restaurant, Bernard paced nervously, his usual bravado replaced with a flicker of uncertainty. He had tried to ignore the backlash, to downplay the significance of the situation, but now it was impossible to avoid. The entire world was watching, and he knew there was no escaping the consequences of his actions. When Snoop arrived, the crowd erupted into cheers. He stepped out of a sleek black SUV, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that exuded both style and authority. Beside him were local leaders, activists, and members of the community who had rallied behind his message. Together, they made their way toward the restaurant, their presence commanding and undeniable. Bernard stood at the door, his face pale as he watched Snoop approach. He felt a pang of regret, whether for his actions or for the fallout they had caused, he wasn't sure. All he knew was that he had underestimated the power of the man he had dismissed so casually. As Snoop entered the restaurant, the tension in the air was palpable. The remaining diners watched in stunned silence, their eyes darting between Bernard and Snoop. Bernard opened his mouth to speak, but Snoop held up a hand, silencing him with a calm but firm gesture. "We need to talk," Snoop said simply. The restaurant fell silent as Snoop stood in the center of the dining room, his commanding presence impossible to ignore. Every eye in the room was on him, and Bernard, once so smug and self-assured, now looked pale and uneasy. The whispers of the remaining patrons had ceased, replaced by an almost suffocating tension. Snoop folded his hands in front of him, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Chef Bernard," he began, his voice steady and resonant. "You and I got some things to clear up." Bernard stiffened, his jaw clenching as he glanced around the room. He could feel the weight of every gaze, the unrelenting scrutiny of the cameras outside, and the knowledge that his actions were now under a global microscope. But despite his unease, his pride wouldn't allow him to back down. "Mr. Broaddus," Bernard said stiffly, his voice low but edged with defensiveness. "If you've come here to lecture me, I'll remind you that this is my establishment. I run it as I see fit." Snoop raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "That's clear," he said. "The question is, how's that working out for you?" A murmur of quiet laughter rippled through the crowd, and Bernard's face flushed. He took a step forward, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "If you think you can come in here and embarrass me—" "Embarrass you?" Snoop interrupted, his tone sharp but controlled. "Man, you embarrassed yourself the moment you decided to judge me based on what I was wearing and how I looked. You could have shown respect, treated me like any other guest, but instead, you made a choice. And now, you're dealing with the consequences." Bernard opened his mouth to respond, but Snoop held up a hand, cutting him off. "This ain't just about me," he continued. "It's about everyone who's ever walked into a place like this and been made to feel like they don't belong. You think it's just a dress code? It's deeper than that. It's about the way you see people, the assumptions you make, the way you let your bias shape the way you treat folks." The room was utterly silent, the weight of Snoop's words hanging in the air. Even Bernard seemed at a loss for how to respond, his usual bravado faltering under the intensity of the moment. Snoop turned slightly, addressing the diners who were watching with wide eyes. "This ain't about talking him down," he said, gesturing toward Bernard. "It's about building something better. We can't just call out the problem, we gotta be part of the solution. And that starts with having conversations like this, even when they're uncomfortable." From the back of the room, Anna stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly but her expression resolute. "He's right," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I've worked here long enough to see how people are treated differently based on how they look or where they come from. It's not just about the food or the service, it's about the culture we create. And that has to change." Snoop nodded, giving Anna an encouraging smile. "What's your name?" he asked. "Anna," she said, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I'm a server here." "Anna," Snoop repeated, his tone warm. "Takes guts to speak up. Appreciate you doing that." Anna's confidence seemed to grow under Snoop's praise, and she turned to Bernard, her gaze steady. "This restaurant has so much potential," she said. "But it'll never reach it if you keep pushing people away. People like Mr. Broaddus. People who could help this place become more than what it is." Bernard's face was a storm of conflicting emotions, pride, anger, and something that almost resembled shame. He glanced around the room, seeing not only the judgment in the eyes of the patrons but also the silent agreement of his staff. For the first time, he seemed to grasp the full weight of what he had done. Snoop stepped closer, his voice softening. "You got a choice, Bernard," he said. "You can dig your heels in, keep going the way you've been going, and watch this place crumble around you. Or you can listen, really listen, and take this as an opportunity to grow." Bernard's lips parted, but no words came out. He looked down at his hands, his mind racing. For years, he had prided himself on being in control, on running his restaurant with an iron fist. But now, faced with the reality of his actions, he couldn't ignore the cracks in the foundation he had built. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally, his voice low and strained. Snoop smiled faintly, a glimmer of warmth in his eyes. "I ain't a skin for much," he said. "Just that you open your mind, your heart, and your doors to everyone. no matter where they come from, what they wear, or how they look. Start treating people with the respect they deserve. And if you need help doing that, I'm here. The room held its breath, waiting for Bernard's response. The chef looked up at Snoop, his expression a mixture of reluctance and vulnerability. "You'd really help me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Of course," Snoop said. "This ain't about tearing you down, man. It's about lifting all of us up." For a long moment, Bernard said nothing. Then, slowly, he extended his hand toward Snoop. "I don't deserve your help," he said quietly. "But if you're willing, I'll try." Snoop took Bernard's hand, shaking it firmly. "That's all I ask," he said. The crowd erupted into applause, the tension in the room finally breaking. Anna smiled, relief washing over her as she saw the shift in Bernard's demeanor. For the first time, it felt like real change was possible. Over the next several weeks, the transformation of La Maison Étoilée began. With Snoop's guidance, Bernard worked to rebuild the restaurant's culture from the ground up. He met with community leaders, attended diversity training sessions, and sought input from his staff on how to make the restaurant more inclusive. Anna played a key role in the process, her voice becoming one of the most influential in shaping the new direction of the restaurant. Together, she and Bernard created a space that celebrated diversity, offering a menu that incorporated flavors and influences from all over the world. The change didn't go unnoticed. The story of La Maison Étoilée's transformation spread, drawing attention from media outlets and food critics alike. People from all walks of life began to visit the restaurant, drawn not only by the food but by the message it represented. One evening, as the restaurant buzzed with activity, Bernard stood in the kitchen, watching as his staff worked seamlessly to deliver a flawless service. He felt a sense of pride he hadn't experienced in years, not the pride of perfection, but the pride of creating something meaningful. Snoop entered the kitchen, his presence as commanding as ever. "How's it going, chef?" he asked, a smile on his face. Bernard turned to him, his expression warm. "Better than I could have imagined," he said. "And it's all thanks to you." Snoop shook his head. "Nah," he said. "You did the work. I just gave you a push." Bernard smiled, his gratitude evident. "Well, either way," he said, "I owe you more than I can say." Snoop clapped him on the shoulder. "Just keep paying it forward," he said. "That's all that matters." As the night went on, the restaurant buzzed with life, a testament to the power of redemption and the strength of community. Snoop sat at a table near the center of the dining room, sharing a meal with Anna and a group of local leaders. Around them, laughter and conversation filled the air, a celebration of the progress that had been made. And for the first time in a long time, La Maison Étoilée felt like it truly belonged to everyone. The transformation of La Maison Étoilée became the talk of the city. It wasn't just about a restaurant anymore. It was about a symbol of change, redemption, and the power of unity. Articles appeared in newspapers with headlines like, "From Scandal to Sanctuary, How La Maison Étoilée Became a Beacon of Hope." Social media buzzed with posts celebrating the restaurant's new inclusive approach, and food bloggers eagerly shared glowing reviews of the revamped menu. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere was unrecognizable compared to the stiff, elitist space it had been weeks ago. The once exclusive establishment now hummed with life, laughter, and a sense of warmth. Families, couples, and groups of friends from all walks of life filled the tables, enjoying dishes that blended Bernard's French culinary expertise with influences from around the world. Anna was now the restaurant's floor manager, her leadership skills and empathy earning her the role. She moved through the dining room with confidence, checking on guests and ensuring that every detail of their experience reflected the restaurant's new ethos. At one table, a group of college students shared plates of fusion appetizers, their lively chatter filling the air. At another, a couple celebrated their anniversary, toasting with glasses of champagne as a waiter delivered a beautifully plated dessert. The diversity of the crowd was a stark contrast to the exclusivity of the past, and it was clear that La Maison Étoilée had become a place where everyone felt welcome. In the kitchen, Bernard worked alongside his staff with a newfound humility and respect. He no longer barked orders or dismissed input from his team. Instead, he encouraged collaboration, valuing the perspectives and ideas of those around him. It was a dynamic he had never imagined embracing, but one that had transformed the way he approached his work. Snoop entered through the front doors, greeted by smiles and nods of recognition from the staff and diners alike. He had become a regular presence at the restaurant, not as a celebrity, but as a mentor and friend. Tonight, he wore a sharp navy blazer over a casual black turtleneck, his laid-back elegance reflecting the new spirit of the restaurant. Anna spotted him immediately and walked over, her face lighting up with a smile. "Snoop, good to see you," she said warmly. "Your usual table?" "You know it," Snoop replied, grinning as he followed her to a corner table that had quickly become his unofficial spot. "How's everything going?" "Place looks good." "It's been amazing," Anna said, her voice filled with pride. "We've been booked solid for weeks." "And the staff? They're finally excited to come to work. It feels like a whole new world." Snoop nodded, his gaze sweeping across the bustling dining room. "That's what happens when you lead with love and respect," he said. "People feel it. They want to be part of it." As Snoop settled into his seat, Bernard emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He hesitated for a moment before approaching Snoop, his expression a mix of gratitude and nervousness. "Mr. Broaddus," Bernard began, his voice soft but steady. "I wanted to thank you again. Not just for giving me a chance to make things right, but for believing in me when I didn't deserve it." Snoop leaned back in his chair, his smile easy and genuine. "Bernard," he said, "you don't gotta keep thanking me. You did the work. And look at this place now, it's all you." Bernard's face flushed slightly, but he smiled. "It's not just me," he said. "It's everyone. Anna, the staff, the community, they've all played a part. And it's made me realize how much I still have to learn." "That's the right mindset," Snoop said. "Ain't nobody perfect. But as long as you're willing to grow, you're on the right track." Bernard nodded, his respect for Snoop evident in his expression. "If you ever need anything, from me or the restaurant, just say the word," he said. "You've got my support always." "Appreciate that," Snoop said. "But what I really want is for you to keep this momentum going. Make this place a beacon for others. Show 'em what's possible when you open your heart." Bernard's eyes glistened with emotion, and he nodded again before retreating to the kitchen. Snoop watched him go, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over him. He had seen Bernard's transformation firsthand, and while there was still work to be done, it was clear that the chef was on a path toward true redemption. As the night went on, Snoop enjoyed his meal, chatting with diners who stopped by his table to thank him or share their own stories of resilience and change. He listened intently, offering words of encouragement and humor that left everyone smiling. Near the end of the evening, a young boy approached Snoop's table, clutching a small notebook in his hands. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old, and his wide eyes were filled with both awe and nervousness. "Excuse me, Mr. Snoop Dogg," the boy said timidly. Can I get your autograph?" Snoop grinned, leaning down to meet the boy's eye level. "Of course, lil' man," he said. "What's your name?" "Jamal," the boy replied, holding out the notebook with trembling hands. Snoop took the notebook and pen, carefully writing a message before signing his name in bold, looping letters. "There you go, Jamal," he said, handing it back. "You keep dreamin' big, aight? The world's yours." Jamal beamed, clutching the notebook to his chest. "Thank you," he said before running back to his parents, who waved at Snoop with gratitude. Moments like this were what Snoop lived for. The chance to connect, to inspire, to leave a positive mark on someone's life. It reminded him of why he had decided to turn the situation with Bernard into an opportunity for growth instead of a moment of revenge. As the restaurant began to wind down for the night, Anna joined Snoop at his table, a cup of tea in her hands. "It's been a good night," she said, her voice warm but tinged with exhaustion. "You've created something really special here." Snoop shook his head, his smile soft. "Nah," he said. "We created it. This place is proof of what happens when people come together." Anna nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "It's been inspiring to see. And it's just the beginning." "You got that right," Snoop said. "This ain't just about one restaurant. It's about showing the world what's possible when you lead with kindness and respect." Anna raised her cup in a toast, and Snoop lifted his water glass to meet it. "To new beginnings," she said. "To change in the game," Snoop replied, clinking his glass against hers. As the last of the diners left and the lights dimmed, Snoop stood by the door, watching as the staff cleaned up and prepared for the next day. Bernard caught his eye and gave him a nod of appreciation, a silent acknowledgement of how far they had come. Outside, the city buzzed with life, but inside La Maison Étoilée, there was a quiet sense of accomplishment. The restaurant had become more than just a place to eat. It was a symbol of redemption, unity, and the power of transformation. Snoop stepped out into the cool night air, his hands in his pockets and a smile on his face. As he walked down the street, the glow of the restaurant's sign reflected behind him, a beacon of hope shining brightly against the darkness. Weeks passed, and the changes at La Maison Étoilée continued to ripple through the community. What began as a single moment of confrontation between Snoop and Bernard had transformed into a movement that extended far beyond the restaurant's walls. The restaurant became a hub for conversations about inclusivity, second chances, and the importance of breaking down prejudices. Snoop's influence didn't stop with his role in mentoring Bernard. His efforts to unite the community were paying off in ways no one had anticipated. Local businesses, inspired by the transformation of La Maison Étoilée, started reaching out to collaborate on initiatives aimed at supporting underserved groups in the area. Small cafes, grocery stores, and even corporate offices began hosting events that celebrated diversity and inclusion, proving that change wasn't just possible, it was contagious. On a crisp Friday evening, the restaurant hosted its first community fundraiser, organized by Anna and Snoop. The goal was to raise money for local charities focused on mental health, youth empowerment, and food security. The dining room, normally set for an intimate crowd, had been transformed into an open space filled with long tables, colorful decorations, and a palpable sense of excitement. Families, community leaders, and even former critics of the restaurant filled the seats, ready to support the cause. As the guests settled in, Anna took the stage at the front of the room, a microphone in her hand and a nervous but excited smile on her face. She glanced at Snoop, who gave her an encouraging nod from his seat near the center of the room. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Anna began, her voice steadying as she spoke. "When I first started working at La Maison Étoilée, I never imagined it would become a place like this. A place where people from all walks of life could come together to share not just food, but stories, ideas, and hope." The crowd erupted into applause, and Anna paused, her eyes scanning the room. "This fundraiser is about more than raising money," she continued. "It's about building connections and creating a future where everyone feels seen and valued. And none of this would have been possible without the vision of someone who reminded us that change starts with kindness. So, it's my honor to introduce the man who's made all of this happen, Snoop Dogg." The room erupted into cheers and applause as Snoop stood and made his way to the stage. He adjusted the mic with practiced ease, his warm smile instantly lighting up the room. "Y'all making me blush," Snoop joked, earning a round of laughter. He paused for a moment, looking out at the crowd, his expression turning thoughtful. "You know, when I first walked into this place, I wasn't thinking about changing anything. I just wanted some good food and a chill night. But life's funny like that. It throws you into situations where you either walk away or step up. And I'm glad I stepped up, 'cause what we've built here is something special." He glanced toward Bernard, who sat at a nearby table, his hands folded in front of him and his face filled with a mixture of gratitude and humility. "But let's keep it real," Snoop continued. "This ain't just about me. This is about all of us. Bernard, my man, you put in the work. Anna, you spoke up when it mattered. And every single person here tonight, you're part of something bigger." The crowd broke into applause again, and Snoop waited for it to die down before continuing. "We're here tonight not just to celebrate what's been done, but to look forward to what's next. 'Cause this is just the beginning. Together, we're gonna keep growing, keep learning, and keep proving that when you lead with love and respect, you can change the game." Snoop raised his glass of sparkling water, his smile wide. "To unity," he said. "And to build in something beautiful." "To unity," the crowd echoed, raising their glasses and clinking them together. The evening continued with laughter, storytelling, and music. Snoop, always the entertainer, joined a local band on stage, surprising the crowd with an impromptu performance that had everyone on their feet. Bernard, who rarely ventured out of the kitchen during service, mingled with the guests, listening to their feedback and sharing his journey of growth. At one point, Bernard found himself speaking with a group of young chefs who had come to the event after hearing about his transformation. They asked him questions about his experience, his mistakes, and how he had managed to overcome his prejudices. It wasn't easy, Bernard admitted, his voice tinged with emotion. I had to face some hard truths about myself, truths I didn't want to see. But having people like Snoop and Anna push me, challenge me, it made me realize that change starts with listening. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be better. One of the chefs, a young woman with a determined expression, smiled. That's what we need more of in this industry, she said. People willing to grow and learn instead of staying stuck in old ways. Bernard nodded, a flicker of pride in his eyes. Then let's keep pushing, he said. Together. As the night wound down, the success of the event was clear. The fundraiser had exceeded its goal, raising enough money to support multiple local charities and initiatives. Guests left with smiles on their faces and a renewed sense of hope, many of them sharing their experiences on social media, further amplifying the message of the night. After the last guest had gone, the staff gathered in the dining room, their exhaustion tempered by the pride of what they had accomplished. Anna sat at one of the tables, her feet aching but her heart full. Bernard joined her, a glass of wine in his hand and a rare smile on his face. You did an incredible job tonight, he said, his tone sincere. Anna looked at him, her expression softening. We all did, she replied. This wasn't just about one person, it was about everyone coming together. Bernard nodded, his gaze distant. You know, he said after a moment, for years I thought success was about control. About making everything perfect and keeping out anything that didn't fit my vision. But now I see that real success is about connection. About building something that's bigger than yourself. Anna smiled, her respect for Bernard deepening. That's a lesson we can all learn, she said. Across the room, Snoop stood with Liam, who had been one of the restaurant's quietest employees before the transformation. The two of them were laughing about something, their camaraderie a testament to the bonds that had formed in the wake of the restaurant's rebirth. As the staff began to clean up and prepare for the next day, Snoop stepped outside, the cool night air wrapping around him like a blanket. He looked up at the restaurant sign, its warm glow a reminder of how far they had come. A soft voice broke the silence. Heading out already? Snoop turned to see Anna standing behind him, her jacket slung over one arm. He smiled. Just tucking it all in, he said. It's been a long journey. Anna nodded, her expression thoughtful. Do you think it'll last? She asked. All the changes, the progress we've made? It will, Snoop said firmly. 'Cause it ain't just about this place. It's about the people. And as long as we keep pushing, keep lead in with love, the ripple effect's gonna keep spreading. Anna smiled, her faith renewed. Thanks for believing in us, she said. And for showing us what's possible. Always, Snoop replied, his smile warm. This ain't the end, it's just the beginning. As they stood there, the lights of the city twinkling in the distance, it was clear that the story of La Maison Étoilée wasn't just a story of redemption. It was a story of hope, of community, and of the incredible things that could happen when people chose to lead with kindness. The months that followed the fundraiser cemented La Maison Étoilée's new identity, not just as a restaurant but as a beacon for the kind of change the community desperately needed. What had started as a story of conflict had now become a story of transformation and redemption, one that people from all over the city, and even beyond, were eager to be part of. Snoop continued to support the restaurant's journey, not just as a mentor but as an advocate for the broader message it now represented. He frequently visited, often bringing with him community leaders, activists, and friends who shared his passion for unity and inclusivity. Each visit became an event, drawing crowds to the restaurant and sparking conversations that extended far beyond its walls. One particularly special evening, La Maison Étoilée hosted its most ambitious event yet, a free dinner for underserved families in the community. The idea had been Anna's, inspired by the overwhelming support the restaurant had received from the neighborhood since its transformation. Bernard had embraced the idea wholeheartedly, even going so far as to personally invite families who had once felt excluded from his establishment. The dining room was unrecognizable that night. Gone were the stiff white tablecloths and formal place settings, replaced by long, communal tables adorned with vibrant flowers and handwritten notes of welcome. Children's laughter filled the air as they played in a corner set up with games and activities, while their parents mingled with staff and volunteers who moved through the room with genuine warmth. In the kitchen, Bernard worked with a focus and energy that felt entirely new. He had created a special menu for the evening, drawing inspiration from the diverse cultures represented in the community. Dishes ranged from traditional French fare to soul food, Latin American cuisine, and more. It was a far cry from the rigid menu he had once prided himself on, but as he plated each dish, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment he hadn't known was possible. Snoop arrived midway through the event, greeted by cheers and applause from the families and staff alike. He waved to the crowd, his signature grin lighting up the room, before making his way to the kitchen to check in with Bernard. "How's it going, chef?" Snoop asked, leaning casually against the doorframe. Bernard looked up from the plate he was garnishing, a rare smile breaking across his face. "Better than I ever imagined," he admitted. "I wasn't sure I could pull this off, but seeing the joy in that room, it's worth every second." Snoop nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Told you it'd be worth it," he said. "This is what it's all about, connecting with people, making 'em feel seen and valued." Bernard set down his tongs and turned to face Snoop fully. "I owe so much of this to you," he said, his voice earnest. "You gave me the chance to be better, and I don't take that lightly." Snoop waved him off with a grin. "Man, you did the work," he said. "I just gave you a nudge. But I'm proud of you, Bernard. You turned this place into something real special." Bernard nodded, emotion flickering in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. "For everything." As Snoop made his way back to the dining room, he stopped to chat with families, his genuine warmth and humor making everyone feel at ease. At one table, he sat down with a single mother and her 2 children, listening intently as the mother shared her story of struggle and resilience. "You're an inspiration," Snoop told her, his voice full of admiration. "Keep doing what you're doing. You're stronger than you know." The mother smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "You have no idea how much this means to us." As the night went on, the atmosphere grew even more vibrant. A local musician, inspired by the restaurant story, performed a soulful set that had the entire room swaying and clapping along. Bernard emerged from the kitchen to join the festivities, his once stoic demeanor now relaxed and open. He mingled with guests, accepting their thanks and sharing his own gratitude for their support. Anna, meanwhile, moved through the room with her usual quiet confidence, ensuring everything ran smoothly. At one point, she found herself standing beside Snoop as he watched a group of children playing near the makeshift activity corner. "You've got a good thing here," Snoop said, his voice low but full of pride. Anna smiled, her gaze softening as she looked around the room. "We do," she said. "And it's because of everyone who believed in what this place could become." "Don't sell yourself short," Snoop said. "You were one of the first to speak up, to stand for what's right. That takes courage." Anna blushed slightly, but her smile grew. "It's easier to be brave when you have people like you backing you up," she said. "You showed us all what's possible." Snoop chuckled, his gaze still on the children. "Nah," he said. "Y'all showed me. This ain't about me, it's about us. All of us." As the event wound down, Bernard took the stage to thank everyone for coming. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, but the sincerity in his words was unmistakable. "I used to think this restaurant was about me," he admitted, his gaze sweeping the room. "About my vision, my reputation. But I've learned that it's about so much more. It's about the people, the connections we make, the stories we share, the ways we lift each other up. Tonight, you've shown me what this place is truly meant to be. And for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart." The room erupted into applause, the sound carrying a sense of unity and hope. Bernard stepped down from the stage, and Snoop met him halfway, pulling him into a firm handshake that turned into a hug. The crowd cheered louder, the moment a powerful symbol of how far they had all come. Outside, as the last guest departed and the staff began cleaning up, Snoop stood by the entrance with Anna and Bernard, the three of them looking out at the quiet street. "This ain't the end, you know," Snoop said, his tone light but resolute. "This is just the beginning." Anna nodded, her expression thoughtful. "There's so much more we can do," she said. "Not just here, but everywhere." Bernard placed a hand on her shoulder, his face filled with pride. "And we will," he said. "Together." As the three of them stood there, the lights of La Maison Étoilée glowing warmly behind them, it was clear that the restaurant had become more than just a place to eat. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when people chose to listen, to grow, and to lead with kindness. And for Snoop, Bernard, Anna, and the countless lives they had touched, the journey was far from over. The transformation of La Maison Étoilée continued to resonate, creating a ripple effect far beyond the neighborhood it called home. What began as a single restaurant's effort to correct its course had become a movement, one that inspired other businesses, organizations, and individuals to rethink how they treated people, and how they could foster inclusivity in their own spaces. Bernard, once a stubborn and rigid leader, had fully embraced his new role as not only a chef but a community advocate. His humility and willingness to grow had turned him into a symbol of redemption, and he found himself invited to panels and events where he shared his story. At first, he had been hesitant to speak publicly, worried that his past actions would overshadow the progress he had made. But with Snoop's encouragement, Bernard had stepped into the spotlight, using his journey as a way to inspire others. One evening, Bernard was invited to a roundtable discussion on inclusivity in the culinary world. The event was held at a local university, and the audience was a mix of students, aspiring chefs, and industry professionals. Bernard sat beside Snoop and Anna, who had been instrumental in shaping the restaurant's new direction, and he listened intently as others shared their perspectives. When it was Bernard's turn to speak, he cleared his throat, his hands resting nervously on the table. He glanced at Snoop, who gave him a reassuring nod, and then at Anna, whose calm confidence steadied him. "I'll be honest," Bernard began, his voice measured but sincere. "I never thought I'd be sitting here, talking about inclusivity. For most of my life, I believed that success in this industry was about control, about maintaining a certain image and keeping everything in its place. But I've come to realize how wrong I was." The room was silent as Bernard continued, his voice growing steadier. "When I dismissed Mr. Broaddus from my restaurant that night, I thought I was protecting its reputation. But in reality, I was letting my own biases blind me. I failed to see the person in front of me, their value, their dignity. And that failure could have destroyed everything I'd worked for." Bernard paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "But thanks to people like Mr. Broaddus and Anna, I was given a second chance. They didn't let me off the hook, they challenged me, pushed me to be better. And because of them, I've learned that true success isn't about exclusion. It's about connection. It's about creating spaces where everyone feels welcome and valued." The audience erupted into applause, and Bernard felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He glanced at Snoop, who clapped him on the back, his grin wide and full of pride. "That's what I'm talking about, chef," Snoop said. "Keep spreading that message." Anna leaned over, her smile soft but encouraging. "You're making a difference, Bernard," she said. "Don't forget that." The event was a turning point for Bernard, solidifying his commitment to using his platform for good. He returned to La Maison Étoilée with renewed energy, eager to continue building on the foundation they had created. Back at the restaurant, the staff had grown into a close-knit team, united by their shared vision of what the restaurant could be. Liam, once shy and hesitant, had blossomed into a confident sous chef, his creativity shining through in the new dishes he helped develop. The servers, many of whom had once felt undervalued, now took pride in their work, knowing they were part of something meaningful. Anna, who had taken on more responsibilities as the restaurant's manager, had become a mentor to the staff, guiding them with patience and understanding. Her ability to lead with empathy had earned her the respect of everyone around her, including Bernard, who often sought her input on important decisions. One afternoon, As Anna worked on the schedule for the following week, Bernard approached her with a thoughtful expression. "Anna," he said, his tone serious but warm. "I've been thinking about something." Anna looked up from her clipboard, curious. "What's on your mind?" Bernard hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I want to make you a partner in the restaurant," he said. "You've been the heart and soul of this place, and I think it's time you have a real stake in its future." Anna's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. "Bernard? I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Bernard replied with a small smile. "You've earned this, Anna. And I can't imagine this place without you." Tears pricked at the corners of Anna's eyes as she processed his words. She nodded, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes," she said. "Thank you, Bernard. I won't let you down." "You never have," Bernard said, clapping her on the shoulder. The announcement of Anna's new role as partner was met with cheers and congratulations from the staff, who saw it as a testament to the restaurant's commitment to growth and progress. Snoop, who had stopped by for a visit, raised a glass in her honor during the staff meeting. "To Anna," he said, his voice filled with pride. "The real MVP of La Maison Étoilée. Keep churning, girl." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity as the restaurant continued to grow and evolve. They hosted cooking classes for local kids, taught by Bernard and Liam, and partnered with nearby schools to provide internships for aspiring young chefs. They also launched a series of community dinners, inviting people from all backgrounds to come together and share a meal. One of the most memorable events was a reunion dinner for families who had once been excluded from the restaurant due to Bernard's rigid policies. The dining room was filled with laughter and warmth as guests shared stories and reconnected over plates of food that reflected the diverse tapestry of the community. As the evening wound down, Snoop stood at the front of the room, holding a glass of wine as he addressed the crowd. "This right here," he said, gesturing to the room, "is what it's all about. Breaking down barriers, building bridges, and coming together as one. Y'all are proof that when we lead with love and respect, we can create something beautiful." The crowd erupted into applause, and Snoop raised his glass, his smile wide. "To La Maison Étoilée," he said, "and to every single one of y'all for making this place what it is." The cheers echoed through the restaurant, a celebration of not just its transformation, but the journey that had brought them all together. Outside, as the night deepened, Snoop stood with Bernard and Anna, the three of them looking out at the city lights. The street was quiet now, but the glow from the restaurant's sign cast a warm light on their faces. "Y'all did something real special here," Snoop said, his voice low but full of pride. "Don't ever forget that." Bernard nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's not just about the restaurant anymore," he said. "It's about what it represents. And that's something worth fighting for." Anna smiled, her gaze steady. "We'll keep fighting," she said. Together. As they stood there, the city alive with possibility around them, it was clear that the story of La Maison Étoilée was far from over. It had become more than just a restaurant. It was a movement, a symbol of what could be achieved when people chose to grow, to listen, and to lead with kindness. And for Snoop, Bernard, Anna, and the countless lives they had touched, the journey was only just beginning.